It's great to be here. It's great to be here as Gimbal Inc. There's been some changes since last time we talked last year. How many people were at Uplink 2013? So you may remember us being presented in the keynote with Dr. Paul Jacobs and talking about a couple items. At that time, we were still Qualcomm. So we had a big change happen in about May of this year. In May of this year, we actually carved out. All right, let's see. They're trying to get the slides up. In May of this year, we actually carved out, and we are actually our own separate company. Now, Qualcomm is still a significant investor. They're just not the controlling investor any longer. So we took on some additional investment inside there. Gave us a great opportunity to be more flexible in this market as we build this out, and to be more flexible with you as the developers to be able to help drive additional innovations in the market. So as they're still trying to get the deck, because they're still trying to get the deck, I'm going to give you just a little bit more background of what we've been doing for the last year. So our history at Qualcomm is very important to us as a standalone company. One of the things that we did in 2012, we actually launched Gimbal. Now, we didn't have proximity, and you guys mostly may know us for beacons, but we had geofencing and some other features. And our partner in Japan, Blogwatcher, Dentsu, and Recruit, launched Gimbal in Japan in 2012. And so they've done some very great things with that and continue to advance with that. So Gimbal has actually been a mature platform for about 2 years now. All right, there we go. That is not mine. I thought I took that out of the slides. Excellent. And so, we've actually been working on this project quite a long time. It incubated in Qualcomm Labs. And so we built and we did the market development around this technology in Qualcomm Labs. And then in 2013 at Uplink, we brought you another component of the solution, and that was beacon technology or proximity to the equation. And so you may have noticed back last year for the ones who attended, Dr. Paul Jacob talked about a couple things in his keynote. He talked about the Miami Dolphins. He talked about NFL. He talked about a company called Titan 360, who is a large out-of-home advertiser in New York City. He talked about these things that could be done or use cases that could fulfill a user's experience inside these venues or inside these areas. What we've done over the past year is we deliver on each one of those, as Dr. Paul Jacobs mentioned last year. And we piloted with the Miami Dolphins in late last year, where they demonstrated quite a few different use cases around gimbal technology, leveraging geofencing, leveraging proximity, and leveraging a full journey, a full experience for the customer. We also, with NFL, we powered the Super Bowl experience from a proximity standpoint. So at MetLife Stadium in Bryant Park and inside of the 10 blocks that were carved out for Super Bowl Boulevard, the NFL leveraged beacons and geofencing technologies to engage with the customers at the venue. So what we talked about, we delivered on, but we've delivered on so much more than that. We've done so much more in the past year. I'm excited to kind of go through the product, but also kind of talk about some of the use cases in different areas that people are innovating with this technology. So we talk about Gimbal. We talk about it from a couple ways. And as you can see by the title, it's really about that digital journey in the physical world. What we're really trying to do is that because we interact with the physical world in so many different ways, there's a digital component of that. There's a passive way of engaging with that. And with Gimbal, we've built around quite a few different features to allow you to take advantage of that interaction with the consumer inside the physical world. And so what we talk about is we talk about a journey. And this journey inside there is a way to actually engage with their customers. And like I said, many of us, or many developers out there know us for our very good beacon technology, but we have geofencing technology layered on top. We have ways to communicate that on each one of those different events. And really what you have is you have the ability to take a step-by-step along this physical path and convert it into a digital experience. And so we're providing this out to our developer community to take advantage of knowing when you're away from a venue, knowing when you arrive at a venue, and then knowing when you're inside. But that's still only half of that journey. The other half is on the way out. Those are all opportunities for experiences for your user base and also for data for understanding the trends and interactions that may make it better next time they're there. So what we have here is we have really this digital journey in the physical world from Gimbal. So we do have beacons. I do have a fishbowl of beacons up here that you guys are welcome to take one afterwards. We have other beacons as well. And by far, they are the best beacons out there. And let me explain why. Is because I talked a little bit about our heritage at Qualcomm. We understand mobile. The team that carved out with Gimbal understands mobile, understands RF, understands hardware. And to have the best experience, you have to understand these components. Because what matters is a good beacon that has a good, clean signal. Really what that translates into is an experience that is consistent from just not from the experiential side, but also from the data side, which is important for you as you build out your experiences. However, that's still only one component of Gimbal. We have geo-fencing technology layered in with beacon technology, understanding your audience before they arrive, audience knowledge, notifications. When you start to combine all these components together, it gives you an ability to really interact with your consumer base at different points along that journey so that you can make sure that you're getting the right message at the right time. We also have the ability to manage the platform. So we have a management console, but we also have it driven by APIs as well. So very similar functionality in the manager can be programmatically driven by the APIs. Additionally, we work on the Android and on the iOS platforms. So when we talk about Gimbal, we talk about this set of features combined together to actually understand that journey in the physical world. I'm going to go in a little bit more detail on each one of these, just kind of give you some understanding of why they're different and why when you combine them together, it's really a unique proposition. So we talk about geofencing. Everyone in the room, I'm sure, understands geofencing and also understands some limitations. For example, how many geofences you can load within a given app on certain platforms. Some platforms have, for example, a 20 geofence limit to be able to load. Now, if you think about this from a retailer standpoint, you think about this from a brand standpoint, 20 locations, that's not very many. You think about the retailers with thousands of stores, hundreds of stores, you'll have to build some way of managing to unload and offload those. What we have is the ability for a developer to load in an unlimited amount of fences. And so basically you go to the manager or call through the APIs, the ability to load those fences into the system. Now, when I think of a fence, or when I first started this, I thought of a fence very much of a radial-based fence, circles. But if you look at real estate and you look at buildings and you look at actually what you want to geofence, it's not very often it's a circle. So as you can see up there, you can see a polygon. You can draw around a campus. And that happens to be the Qualcomm campus, but you can draw around the campus. And if you can imagine trying to put a radial type geofence across it, you're actually going to get a lot of adjacent properties around there. And what that really means is false positives for the engagement you want to give. So when you can draw around from a polygonal standpoint, you'll get a better experience because you're going to have a more true engagement from that standpoint. That's another differentiator that's out there. Additionally, we license some data. We license some data from Maponics. So we thought it was important to our developer community that may want to understand where different shopping districts or different airports or other type of points of interest are. We license data, we load it into the system, and those are available for developers to go pull into their account and leverage without having to go draw potentially like shopping districts in Texas. So you can pull those in. So what we're trying to do is really understand at a macro level the way to actually set up part of the journey. And then what we have is going forward is the beacon side, where it actually takes it to the micro or the proximity. So outside to in is one way to look at it. And with the beacons, obviously everyone's heard of iBeacon. We are iBeacon. We're one of the first iBeacons on the market. And what we have here is we have some additional differentiators on there. I talked about our heritage at Qualcomm and why we build a very good product and why it's actually happens to be a very good experience. But we also have done some very creative things as well. This beacon, or the white one that's shown there, has two antennas as well. So there's a directional and omnidirectional antenna. So you have one SKU for potentially dual use cases. So you get to choose which one you want. So you think of a directional, you have about 120-degree beam spread out the front, and omni is all the way around. And so that gives you the ability to buy one product and for your use case, leverage it the way you want. So it's flexibility built inside there. And that's configurable through software. We also have some security built on top of it. Now, iBeacon's fantastic, but we thought that it was important to have another security layer on top of there. That security layer does a couple things. It really gives you as a developer just not physical ownership when you buy it, but the digital ownership associated with that as well. Because what we have is, if you think of it, kind of like rolling code, RSA type VPN token, there's some security built on top of it, and you have ownership associated with that. So other developers can't take advantage of your beacons that are deployed out in the environment. So if you're a retailer, that's a great thing. It can stop showrooming. It can stop people from using it. So also as a consumer, it means that I feel a little bit more protection because the experience that I'm supposed to get is driven by that ownership model. So that security component is actually very, very important to making sure that you provide the right experience, but also getting the most out of your purchase as you actually put a beacon into the environment for your use cases. We do have many form factors. As you can see, I have this one. We have smaller ones. This one right here, this beacon is our Gimbal Series 20. And what's unique about this is that it has a battery life of about 14 to 18 months. And it has a NEMA 3 IP64 been built to those specifications. So it works extremely well inside, but it works extremely well outside. If everyone remembers how cold it was in New York at the Super Bowl, I'm looking at Brian Dunphy in the front. He was there, he was out there, he complained it was pretty cold. These continue to work, and they continue to work in very harsh environments, inside and out. And so that gives you the flexibility to think about use cases that weren't just built for around maybe shelves or around the different areas, but also putting these outside from that standpoint. So a lot of opportunity, a lot of flexibility, and these are the ones that are being deployed. Now, I talked about that experience being very clean in data. Because we understood antennas extremely well and RF at Qualcomm, this really gives you the best experience possible because it is very clean and it's very true to its RF signal, which is good for a developer and for the experience. And so one other component is that you can manage the beacons inside of Gimbal Manager. I think it's important because we do have the ability to register, get ownership, as well as add tags and other configuration settings around that. One other note is that the way the Gimbal Manager works, it does work with the Gimbal beacons, but it also, if there are other iBeacons that you may have purchased because you haven't purchased your Gimbal beacons yet, you can load in those UUIDs and major minors and then manage the analytics around those as well. So we have some flexibility for basically managing other beacons in the environment, at least from a data perspective on collection. Which leads me into analytics and reporting. So the experience is very, very important, but understanding that experience from a data perspective is also extremely important. And so with inside Gimbal, we have the ability to allow you to get the data out. If you already have an existing analytics system, such as large retailers do or venues, you can take the data out. There's many ways from an API or CSVs or other ways to get the data into your system. But we also have some reporting analytics tools as well. So today we are continuing to invest in that, so there'll be some additional analytics that you'll be seeing very shortly on the manager. And with that, you can also start to see, and just for example, with regards to retailers, they can start to look at conversions potentially on campaigns, unique visits, repeat visits, and other interesting trend lines that you may get based on your user base. And when you combine this with geofencing and the beacons, what you get is, again, the ability to understand your audience before they arrive, when they arrive, and when they're inside. And so that gives you the ability to have this entire journey of the user from beginning to end. And that's the best way to engage with your user, understanding that entire set of journey profile. Now, privacy is one thing that is very important. And from the standpoint of you have to make sure that you have the trust of your user base. And this technology is very powerful and can be very important to your user base, but it has to be done the right way. And there are some key principles to making sure that you don't violate that relationship or that trust relationship you have with the user base. First one is transparent opt-in. You're asking for their location, you're asking for their proximity. You need to be upfront with how you're going to use it. Then you need to give them the ability to change it later, so they have the ability to manage it. I may say yes today, but I may want to turn it off tomorrow for many reasons. Or I just may want to turn it off in general. So I need to be able to kind of opt out of that as well. So if you follow those three basic principles, what we see in the market is that that is a very trustful way of engaging with this type of technology with your user base. It's important to get that right. Otherwise, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to delete your app, and they're going to turn it off, they're going to take it away, and it's death by deletion. And so you don't want to violate the trust of your users. So I'm going to give you some examples of Gimbal in action. So I said we've been pretty busy. We've been in quite a few different areas. I've talked a little bit about some venue and some stadiums, so we'll go into a little more detail, but also talk about some use cases and some unique things that we're doing that we're not sure that you guys have heard before. So from the venues and stadiums, we talked a little bit about the Dolphins. The Dolphins have launched an app this year. So the pilot they did translated into a commercial opportunity, and they have basically taken those use cases and built them into an application with one of the developers, Ambience. And they have basically built out an app for the Dolphins. And so if you think about leveraging geofencing and beacons at a stadium, if you can greet your fan base before they arrive, you can make it easier for them to get inside the stadium by maybe, hey, gate A, B, and C are really busy, but G and F are empty. If you can help direct them before they get there, it's one of the ways you can make it a more meaningful or brighter day at the stadium. And when they arrive, a greeter, hey, welcome to the stadium. It's going to be a great day. Looking forward to a win. If you can communicate with them and get your loyal fan base to engage, and this is all through geofence, not even beacons, that's a way to kind of interact with them. And if you can use beacons to interact with them when they're inside the stadium, if they're using it around potentially Dolphins historical figures, if there's statues there and you want additional information, or if you want it for concession or merchandising or notifications around certain scores or events, they're all opportunities to take geofencing and using beacons and then transition to beacons inside of the stadium. One of the unique things with the platform when you use the features together is, for example, if you wanted to talk to the audience, let's say maybe last call, and you just wanted to talk to the people that were sitting inside the stadium, not the people that are sitting potentially outside the stadium or in another city. With Gimbal, you know your audience who is actually at the location. You know the audience that you can communicate with there. So you can say, for example, last call for drinks or last call for concessions. You can communicate and send a message just to the people that are there. Now that's very relevant. It's very, very important at the last call there. But it's not to the people who are at the stadium. So it's a way to make sure that you're giving the relevant message. So using the communicate or notification feature with that, those events and those triggers allow you to actually engage with your audience in real time through the different fencing in Gimbal. Additionally, just a couple other notes on stadiums is you may have noticed noticed in the press that Major League Baseball had also deployed out beacons. They used the Gimbal beacons, and it was deployed out to, as the press release stated, about 20 plus different ballparks throughout the. I think they may have more now, but MLB used that. We also have it in other stadiums that are out there, such as the Dolphins. So there is a lot of different use cases and a lot of different stadiums that are deploying this because they really understand the value of that fan experience. And when we talk about venues, we talk about it in a very broad sense. And we talk about it from stadiums, potentially malls, potentially areas that are outside, or convention centers as well. And so when we look at it, there are also partners that are deploying out in museums and convention centers. One note is LACMA, the LA County Museum of Art. They leverage Gimbal to be able to create an experience inside the museum, an understanding of the exhibit, of the art that's there that you may not have gotten if you didn't have a little bit of extra information that was timely, that was relevant, that was important about what you're standing in front of. So they leveraged Gimbal to be able to give that information, that experience that you might have missed because you just didn't understand particular subtleties about what you're potentially looking at. And so they saw that was a great opportunity to leverage such technology to engage with their museum goers. Convention centers, that's just a natural. I mean, if you look at this event or this potentially convention area, or if you look at San Diego Convention Center, they're just fantastic places to be able to leverage beacon technology and leverage that as an offering to the exhibitors or to the overall location components associated with anybody that's coming to the area. Additionally, we have some partners who have been building out for different festivals. I'm sure everyone's heard of Tribeca Film Festival and also if not attended South by Southwest. So one of our partners, Eventbase, builds basically experiences for these wonderful events. They've done a phenomenal job with Tribeca. They leveraged additionally some of the things that we've done with Titan outside, and I'll talk a little bit more about Titan in a couple slides, but they've done a fantastic experience at the film festival, really engaging with the participants throughout the entire experience, be it with inside the theater, or be it when they're coming or they're going, or when they're around particular areas. They did a phenomenal job of basically that experience. And they did that also at South by Southwest. So South by Southwest also deployed out an experience for the event. Additionally, the Uplink app that maybe many of you have downloaded is also Gimbal enabled. So there are beacons inside here, there are other fences, so they're leveraging the platform to build that engagement. So brands and retailers. So obviously it's natural for retailers to want to engage with their customers, understand the loyalty associated with the customer base, but also the brand affinity they have as well. There are a lot of opportunities in retail to be able to engage, to make sure that they're getting the communications that are most relevant, that most meaningful for that. One of the most notable ones that I can talk about right now is we have a partner who is basically built in the Gimbal platform and has leveraged it to basically for GameStop. So ShelfBucks is one of the partners that has integrated in our platform into their platform and has leveraged that to basically provide GameStop an experience, an in-store experience for their user base. So what we're seeing is retail that was initially piloting maybe the first half of the year are actually truly buying the second half, and they're deploying. So there's a maturity cycle inside the market right now where it was initially new use cases or understanding the education that to go with it, and now it's actually they're bringing those use cases to us, and they have a good understanding of what they want to do. So the maturity cycle associated with this is starting to increase. So there are some other things that from a mobile solution providers, I talked a little bit about ShelfBucks. There are other partners out there. So with Gimbal, there are many ways that we actually work with partners in the ecosystem. We work directly with you as developers, as brands, as retailers, as solution providers. As a solution provider, we have the opportunity to engage with you for potentially integration deeper with your existing solution. So I talked a little bit about ShelfBucks, but there are many other partners that we have as well that have integrated in the Gimbal platform. Another one example here is Coupon Media, who has integrated that in. And they have basically leveraging the Gimbal platform for many of the use cases I described. But they have a great, these partners have great additional service value they add on top. So they allow us to really be the physical and digital bridge out there, and then they build their services on top of that. And then advertisers, there's obviously a natural want and desire to understand a little bit more about the customer or the user base out there to be able to engage with them. So we're starting to see, for example, Verve Mobile has basically integrated our SDK to be able to do some hyperlocal type advertising around that. Obviously doing things the right way, again, all with the privacy components I talked about earlier. So I talked a little bit about our beacons being outside. Well, we have some beacons that are really outside, and we have some beacons that are in out-of-home advertising assets in different cities, but we're also working on transportation areas. Because if you think about where a beacon, for example, in transportation hubs could be useful, is they could influence our entire day, entire travel, our entire path that we take. For example, if I had beacons on a platform, and I had an app that was beacon aware associated with that, it could know that I was there. It can communicate with me, your train's running late, or the line's down. So I can make a conscious decision to do something different so I can get to where I need to go. And that just kind of happens in a serendipitous type moment, just because I'm there and it understands a little bit more about me. And so that gives me some ability to change my day, to influence it. So there are many use cases, especially from a lifestyle standpoint, where this can truly enhance the day-to-day engagement that we have with the world around us. We talked a little bit about Titan, and Titan is an out-of-home advertiser. And they have some assets in New York City. And during a couple events that were there, they were leveraged to understand how to engage with some customers for better information, for example, maybe around the film festival and around other areas. And so that gives you the ability to leverage hyperlocal type proximity at a very low battery cost. If anyone's been in New York and you've tried to use Google Maps or you tried to use other type of mapping ways or others, just in general, in New York City, you start to see your battery go down pretty fast. This is an opportunity at a very low battery profile to get very granular communications against beacons that are potentially deployed. So what we're seeing is that there's an opportunity between transportation hubs, between out of home, and between just general spaces where people can potentially leverage this type of technology. Now again, I mentioned all this about security and privacy. All that's very important for the apps that take advantage of that as well. So there's a couple ways, some examples of how some of the beacons out in public places have been used. Talked a little bit about Tribeca. They used it for some events that they've done to be able to potentially give surveys or other informations about what theaters are nearby, what you just saw, to encourage you to give feedback and vote. And you can see some of the numbers associated with that. We have another partner, BN2, who has taken the SDK and used it for other gamification, loyalty-based type events. And what they've done is they've leveraged both geo-fencing and beacons. And if you can look, when it becomes relevant, when it becomes, the transition between geo-fencing and proximity, they saw an increase of basically conversion rate associated with that for the pushes. We have another partner, ShopAdvisor, who is leveraging the beacons as well to understand. ShopAdvisor is a shopping affinity app. You have certain things you say, I would like you to watch the price for X, Y, and Z. And as you're inside of potentially a city, they can remind you that, hey, the price of this at the stores around you is at the target you were looking for. And so what they saw within corporations is the ability to communicate with the things that I want, the things that are on my wish list for the prices that I want, with the retailers or other partners that are around the area. So it's a way to kind of leverage proximity in a new way, where most people think of it as use cases inside of buildings. So inside and out, you really got to broaden and innovate where you can actually use this type of technology. And then when you roll it all back into the platform, you map it back into the geofencing, you map it back with proximity, the communication associated with that on those events, and then the analytics associated with it as well. And then you really get a real insight to what your user base is doing. So I thought I've seen a ton of use cases, and I'm always surprised. Everyone brings me a new use case. They say, hey, can we do this? What do you think about this? And I'm surprised that on a daily basis, somebody has thought of a new way to leverage either individually or group together these features. And so when I look out there, I see a lot of innovative individuals who can come up with those use cases that none of us have thought about. It's going to really potentially change the way that we interact with the physical world going forward. So we have beacons up here for you. So you can take some beacons, you can configure those. You can leverage those in the manager. And basically, you can use the tools and the SDK from the Gimbal manager component to be able to build your next app. So we're excited to see what you guys come up with. There's so much new things that are out there that nobody's thought of. And I'm excited to kind of see what you guys are going to come up with in 2015 when we're back here as well. So if you guys have any questions, I'd love to ask or answer any questions you may ask.
Thank you, Kevin. We've got a mic here going around the room, so if you could just state your name and company.
David Chan from iSound Media. And just want to ask, so all the interaction they're talking about, does it always require application on the smartphone or whatever device you're talking about?
Yes, so Gimbal has a couple components. We talked about the manager. The SDK does need to be integrated inside of an application, and that integration is what interacts with the Gimbal platform. So there has to be an app.
Hi, this is Gulzar. What's the distribution today for Gimbal, and what are the common places that you have?
Distribution being from...
like a physical distribution of your beacons?
So we have support for our country support. Is that what you're talking about? Or you're just talking about where?
Like, what's the physical distribution today, like in numbers, and what are the common places where it
It's
is?
a great question, but we haven't answered it publicly, so.
Sure.
Carlos Dominguez from Hasbro. What is the resolution or the precision that you have right now on those gimbals on the beacons?
On the beacons. So going outwards of 50 meters or plus from that standpoint, and then you can take it all the way back down to pretty much a simulated hold or touch from that standpoint. Ranging is best when you're about 3-ish meters, 4-ish meters, then it becomes a very good presence detection around that. So you can use the signal strength to be able to determine distance associated with that. And as you get closer, obviously it'll get warmer, or the signal strength gets stronger. And then at that point, with inside of a certain distance, it becomes better for ranging.
Any plans to add Wi-Fi based location services to the platform?
We continue to look at that and look at for the partners and the channel opportunities with that. As you could tell with the GPS and the Wi-Fi and the cell sector, we actually leverage a lot of that stuff for making sure we get the best battery and performance for our geofencing solution. As we look at the partners that are deploying out Wi-Fi based location solutions, we have the opportunity with Gimbal. We are extensible and flexible from that to be able to integrate with those partners.
Qualcomm already have a great component, right?
They do.
On the ranging question, to expand on that, is that handled at the individual beacon? This one up. Is that handled at the beacon device level? So, for instance, if you're in an event, someone's walking around and maybe you want to be tracking them around the entire event, but other people have a use case where they just want the close proximity touch. Can it do multi-range on the same device, same time?
Mm-hmm. It can. You can basically set up different rules for different triggers. So if you wanted to understand in a very broad sense, that I just want to know if they're in the vicinity, but I also want to know when they're really close to something. So you can set up different rules and different engagements associated with that off the same beacon inside the same app.
I think the battery's dying on this, but there you go. There you go.
I'm just curious of the examples that you gave. What has the opt-in been like? What is the consumer's interaction? And, is it changing as they become educated about it?
So I don't have the specific numbers associated with that, but in general, when you're upfront about the value exchange, because that's what it is, a value exchange between you and your user base, then they feel they're getting value for something that they're giving you. And what we see is that we see a very high trend associated with that, because if the value's good enough, then they're going to give that to you. And so again, it goes to that transparent opt-in, and it's transparent to tell them what you're going to do and how you're going to use it and what they're going to get out of it. So we're starting to see, with the transparency, a very good conversion rate with opt-in.
Hi, Eric Valati, Summit Tech. Quick question. What kind of, I noticed you mentioned they're programmable over the air.
Uh-huh.
And what kind of battery impact do you get by having that enabled?
It's a great question. So we do a couple things. So during the device startup, so when you put the batteries in, it goes into a receive mode. And during the receive mode, you can use the Gimbal Beacon Manager that's in the App Store. And if you have the permission, it goes back to that permission ownership model, and it's basically attached to your account. You have the ability, basically, for the settings that you set inside of the Gimbal Manager to be applied to that specific device. And then after it's applied, and after a certain time, it basically stops the receive mode and just goes to transmission. So the impact is almost non-existent because of the way we actually only do the configuration during a certain window on startup.
Questions back here?
Mark Penman with TomTom Licensing. Do you capture your data in your cloud, and if so, do you have any plans to monetize that?
So right now, as the developers leverage our SDK, and as you can tell, we have an analytics solution, so the data is there for them to use from that standpoint, and so it's their data from that particular point. I believe you.
So you mentioned public geofences.
Uh-huh.
Could you provide a little more detail
Yeah.
about what these are and give a real example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked a little bit about the Maponics data set that we licensed and we put into the system to give you guys some value, some additional value for geofencing. So what we call those is public, because you as a developer and me as a developer, we can both import those. So you don't necessarily draw them yourself. We call those public, and because they're open to the developer community to be able to actually pull into the account to use. So our definition of public basically means as a developer on the system, these are available for you to pull in, even though you may not have drawn those geofences inside there. So some partners want to understand particular shopping districts or potential university areas or other things. And instead of going around and drawing those in a particular area, they'll search for those and then they'll import those into their account instead of having to go draw each individual one by themselves. And that gives them the ability to leverage the fences that were already set up with the metadata associated with those, so then you can then use those inside your applications for the experience that you want to bring to your user base.
Can you use an example of a real one?
Yeah, there's some shopping districts in, let's say, Houston. And so partners may want to know when, or brands may want to know when their customers, or engage with their customers when they arrive there. And so instead of drawing that themselves, they basically went in to the manager and said, the drop-down says import public fences. And then they basically said, I want shopping areas in Houston, for example. And then they said, I'll select that and I'll bring that in. And then they built their experience around that versus having to go through and try to draw all those themselves.
How about the relationship with the LT Direct, proximity services?
No, that's a great question. So given our heritage, right, at Qualcomm, we worked actually very closely with the LTE Direct guys and the team when they were actually designing and doing a lot of the work. So what we saw, and you saw that we have beacons and we leverage geofencing and GPS, Wi-Fi, cell sector and all that. From our perspective, we'll continue to add in additional radio technologies or different potentially light technologies into the platform where it makes sense, where we actually continue to build that physical to digital bridge. So in many ways, knowing that LTED and understanding the value it's going to bring to the market, we were designed to actually take advantage of that when it starts to arrive. Countries? It's a great question. So our beacons, there's a couple ways to look at that. Our beacons have certifications in the EU. They have them here in North America and Canada. We have them in PAC Asia countries as well. I think it's between 22 and 26. There's a list on the site that gives you the country listings associated with that. And then we also, from the service standpoint, have very similar footprint associated with that as well. So we have a lot of reach with these in quite a few different countries. We knew it was going to be important. This is going to be a global opportunity, and that the U.S. was going to come up with some very phenomenal use cases, but the rest of the world was as well. And we wanted to make sure that we could actually meet the demand in the rest of the countries. So we continue to add additional regulatory approvals across the platform as we see the business opportunities as well. So we'll seek new regs or regulatory approvals on those. So just to summarize, on the Gimbal site, there's a list of different countries that we support. And then it'll give you the list of the regulatory certifications for that. And it's about 22 to 26 countries. Is there a specific country? Not yet.
Any other questions?
Is there an opportunity to package the metadata that you get around from your beacon, like a specific beacon that you wanted to transfer? I guess a use case might be in terms of like a franchise. If I have a gym in one city, I build the exact same gym in another city. Instead of having to redefine for that second space, I just poured out the location and the beacon itself.
So you just, in the franchise model, just replay it back.
Right, and then even from
to
take that in the next step, I mean, build a community around that so that everybody in the entire company who owns a franchise could say, hey, that's a great idea, hand that over here.
And that way you can just scale out, cookie cutter it, take it from franchisee to franchisee from that standpoint. There's a lot of tools inside there with respect to how the metadata is added and also managed. So I don't know the specifics, but it could be through some of the APIs, REST APIs, or it could be through some of the manager components for which you can then do some duplication across that.
Any other questions for Kevin? We all good?
Well, don't forget your beacons.
There's beacons up here. Take them away.
Yeah.
Get them configured.
Additionally, if you haven't, there's a 3 for free for developers on our site as well. So if you're a new developer, you can get 3 beacons additionally as well.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and everybody.